I decided to quit taking the medication. I went to the neurologist 6 months after I'd quit taking this MS medication. And he said, how are you doing? And I said, well, I'm actually doing great. I said, I've been working with a functional integrative doctor, and I've cleaned up my food and whatever. He said, well, how are you doing on the medicine? And I was like, well, I quit taking it. And he's like, well, why? And I'm like, because I believe I can get well. And he said, have you had any symptoms or any flare-ups? I'm like, no. And he said, oh, so well, you're just lucky. That was the first time with Western medicine that I had been scoffed and like dismissed.
Just lucky.
Like, you're just lucky. And so I tried to tell him about Dr. Terry Walls because she was an MD, like, right? So, I mean, she would have some merit. And I remember looking at the doctor and saying, you have an opportunity with people, even if it's not 100% fix, if they can get some relief just doing this one shift, wouldn't it be worth sharing with them?
Welcome to another episode of Kaizen Cast. Small steps, big changes. Everyone knows our motto, but I always like to share it, especially in times like today when I have a special guest on. But, today is about, our motto is helping others, continuous growth and improvement, and just becoming a better person each day. And this special guest that I have on is truly amazing. Amy Edwards, who we met in our local bakery, just started talking, and I told her my addictions, everything that was going on in my life, and about the podcast. And then one thing led to another, and then she started sharing her story, which you guys are going to be blown away about. It's incredible. I'm truly blessed to have her on. We're going to talk about it in depth, and let's get started. Amy, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is very, very cool. First of all, I think this is my second interview with a woman. Most males have come on because most people that come on my show don't really want to come on. And we spoke about this, and it took you a little bit.
I did put a pause button on you
yeah,
for a little bit. Yeah,
but I paused you back because we had a situation that happened, so it all works out, right?
In
due time. Out. So now's our time. So I do thank you for doing this because it's not only good for me to do what I'm doing, but it's good for you because you get to share this unbelievable journey, because there's so many people out there that are either going through it or have been through it or have since passed, and they have family members that need to hear this. So it's super important that we talk about it. So why don't you start by, number one, your little background on yourself, like where you came from and like where you were from. And
well, that's a whole podcast.
Yeah.
No, just
a quick little snippet.
Okay, I grew up in Texas, born and raised. My whole family's there, and then I moved out in 1997, and I have since lived in Oklahoma, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida now. I think that's it. Yeah, I think so. So I met my husband in New Jersey, and we've moved pretty much every 2 to 4 years for the last 23 or 4 years.
You think this is home now?
I can't ever say that. No, I mean, I love Florida. I love it here, and so I'm hopeful to stay, but I never make a promise because life's wild. Yeah, life's wild.
That's true. That is true, especially with your story. Yeah. All right, so let's get into your story. Okay. Please share, like, from the time it started. Let me explain everything to you, too. Amy beat cancer, but not how you guys would think she beat cancer. Yeah. It was done with no chemo, correct?
No chemo, no radiation, no surgery.
No surgery.
I pretty much exited the Western medical arena for the first 3 years, from onset until about 3.5 years into it.
How old were you when you found out, please?
It was 2019, so I would have been 39. Wow. Yeah.
And you have kids.
I have 2 kids. At the time, they were in middle school and early high school. So yeah, it was a really delicate dance in those couple of years. Now they're 18. One's going to be 19 in a few days, and my oldest will be 21 in July.
Awesome. Yeah. So give me the timeline. So you find out you're not obviously feeling well, something.
So in 2019, I had noticed a lump in this left breast, and I knew it felt off, and so that kind of started the whole event. So I went to an acupuncturist first. I'll put a pause in the cancer scenario because the foundation had been laid back in 2010. I actually was on vacation in Texas, and my vision, got double vision, ended up in the hospital and discovered they gave me a MS diagnosis. And at the time, my babies were like 3 and 4, 2 and 4, 3, 4, 5, early, little. And I just remembered thinking, I only knew of one person that had MS, and it was a kid I went to middle school with. His mom had passed away when he was in 7th grade from MS complications. And so when they looked at me and said, you have MS, I was just like, that's not gonna work, right? Okay, so I'd had a girlfriend who I forever owe my life to. Her name's Joan Karp, and she's this beautiful woman out in central Pennsylvania that was my crunchy granola girlfriend. And I had met her early on when my husband and I first got married, and it looked good on her, but I was McDonald's drive-through, Diet Pepsis, coffee. I did everything, I was just a classic Western girl, just did everything without any thought.
Right.
But I had met her, and she had introduced me to this beautiful way of life, but it just looked good on her. So when I ended up in the hospital and had this MS diagnosis, thrown my way, she was actually my first phone call, and I said, Joan, like, this is what they're saying. Do you think I can get well? And she's like, absolutely. And I remember hanging up the phone that day, and I was just like, this is wild, right? So it took about a year of her sending me information. Now, this was back in 2010, 2011, before paleo was like really a big buzzword. Clean eating, those terms didn't exist. You didn't know the word gluten. Nobody talked about gluten. I mean, it was kind of a no man's land. I think there was like 2 books out on the shelf. There was a book by Lauren Cordain, and then Rob Wolf came out with a book about paleo. And but she started just shuffling me all this information, and I'm like, this just looks crazy. That food doesn't make you sick. Like, right. That's crazy. It took about a year for all this information. She just lovingly just kept planting seeds and sending me stuff to read and watch. And I ran across, she sent me a video by a lady named Dr. Terry Walls, and the name of the video is called Mind Your Mitochondria. And I remember pulling up this little YouTube video, and I started watching it, and tears just started pouring. And it was the first time I thought, I can get well. Like, I can do this. Like, this is in arm's reach. So 2011, I exited the Western medical arena. I found a functional...
Were you, not to cut you off.
Oh, you're fine.
Were you on medicine for MS?
Yes, so they gave me the diagnosis. I took...
Were you feeling like shit?
No.
Okay.
I had double vision. It was mostly that, and I was just frustrated. But no, I never felt bad. When I ended up at the hospital, I was on my way to a Zumba class with a 32-ounce Diet Pepsi in my cup. And I had been to the tanning bed earlier that morning. I mean, there was no thoughts about anything. Yeah. We were just driving down the road, and all of a sudden it was like 2 red trucks, 2 white cars. It just literally split down the middle. Like, when I looked at you, it'd be just 2 of you. And I told my mom, I was like, my eyes had kind of been doing some weird stuff where I felt like I was underwater. Like, I just kept telling her, it's like, my eyes are just kind of doing something weird. This was like a day or 2 before. And I told her, I said, if you find me on the floor, just tell the doctors my eyes were doing something weird. And she was like, my Lord, Amy. And I'm like, well, if I don't say anything and you find me on the floor, you're going to be really unsure what happens. I'm just giving you the precursor. If I'm on the floor, my eyes were doing something weird. But my grandmother had this little 13-inch TV. We were there visiting, and we lived in New York at the time. And I was in Texas visiting, and I was watching this TV, and it just looked like it was underwater. So when my eyes split and did the weird thing, I knew something was going on. So I called some friends in Pennsylvania that were ophthalmologists, and I was like, hey, my eyes are doing this. And they're like, you know, try to see if you can get in with a family member's eye doctor and see if they can rule out if it's the eyes. So my aunt gets me in with her eye doctor, and he says, he's doing all the tests, and he's like, it's not your eyes. This is either neurological or vascular. Now, when I had my babies, they discovered I had a wild first pregnancy, ended up in emergency C-section. My second one was high risk. So all that had a scheduled C-section, and they discovered I had this factor V Leiden, which is like a blood clotting. It causes blood clotting. And so I was like, well, maybe, you know, I had a stroke. Like, I don't know. That's where my mind went. But I was really young. I was only 30 years old at the time. And I mean, it was just none of it made sense. So it was Memorial Day weekend, and the doctor says, like, I can send you to a cardiologist, I can send you to, but it's just going to take time. So I think it's probably best, just, especially with it being a holiday weekend, just go to the emergency room. And so go to the emergency room. I'm pissed about missing my Zumba class. I've got my 32-ounce soda in hand. You know, I've always had one in hand. And I told my family, I'm like, just go. Like, you know, we were having a cookout that night. I was like, just go, I'll be fine. I'm like, ugh. And I'll never forget, the doctor was this Russian woman, and so her accent was really strong. And this was this was 15 years ago, so I wasn't as traveled at this point, so it was really hard to understand her. And I was just like, and she's like, you know, you have multiple sclerosis. And while she's telling me this, her face splits, and there's like 3 eyeballs, and I'm trying not to laugh. And I'm like, this is a really big moment. But I'm like,
this is a really big moment.
And I'm like, but everything, my eyes are just bugging out. And so I just remember MS and like looking at this woman with 3 eyeballs, and it was just so ridiculous. But I was heartbroken because I only knew of one person that had dealt with this, and they'd lost their mom in 7th grade. And I have these 2 little kids, and I'm just like this isn't going to work. And so there goes the rabbit hole. And so it took a long time. So I've discovered this Mind Your Mitochondria video. I was, ooh. And it was like a 180. I was like, okay, like game on.
Can you explain what that means? The
Mind Your Mitochondria. Yeah. So in this video, you can look it up. It's still on YouTube. And she actually has written a book since then. I never followed her prescribed diet because it was like a lot, but you know, but it was the bottom line is mitochondria is the energy powerhouse of your cells. It's what gives us energy, and it's what helps with everything. Right. And so when we are depleted and we're not making good energy, follows sickness and all the things. But this Dr. Terry Walls, she was MD at a big fancy hospital, I think up in Chicago. It's been like 15 years, so I'm a little rusty on some of this. But she ended up with multiple sclerosis and ended up in a 0 gravity wheelchair within a very short amount of time. Like went from like, oh, I'm not feeling well, to I can't hardly walk, and to 0 gravity chair. And she told herself, like I'm a doctor. Why can't I figure out how to fix this, right?
Right.
So she started doing a bunch of research and was going into old medical journals and whatnot, and discovered that healing the mitochondria is like the pinnacle of healing the body. When we can restore, it's kind of like putting gasoline in a car. Like a car with no gas can't go very far. Right. Cells with no energy not being created, you can't go very far. So she started working with food, and within like 6 months to a year, she was up and walking. And so now she speaks all over the world and teaches about it. And she wrote a book. But that was like the introduction to holistic medicine in a nutshell. And I just took it and ran with it. And so it was cleaning up my food, getting rid of the inflammatory foods, which is gluten and the dairy and processed foods and the seed oils. And now what's so interesting, in 2010 and 11, you were a freaking weirdo if you said any of those things. If you went to the grocery store, there was no such thing as Whole30 approved foods. Or, I mean, I was around when these people were building their Facebook platforms and wrote their first books at the, Whole30 and Paleo Solution and all these people I used to follow. And CrossFit kind of came up all at the same time. Yeah. But that was the start of it, was cleaning up my foods and then cleaning up my environment. And
look at where we are in 2025.
Yeah, so
and it's all about Kennedy trying to flip all the switch.
Oh, I love him.
Yeah,
I
me
mean,
too.
You can love him or not love him,
Yeah.
but the fact that he's willing to be brave enough to talk about it in an industry driven culture that we have.
Absolutely.
I tell people this all the time. Anytime you add the word industry on the end of anything, it is no longer about people. Nope. That's why the medical industry, it's not about people. You know, the food industry, it's not about people. These are industries. It's not about people.
It's funny you say that, because I had just had my hip replaced a month ago, and going to rehab, which I had this one done 3 years ago, was completely different in rehab, because it was like a herd of cattle this time versus last time there was a little bit more TLC. And it is an industry now, because it's like they double book.
Insurance industry.
Yeah, industry.
Yeah, it's an industry. And it's not about people anymore.
It's not.
And that's the saddest part
and
of it.
if you really want to, if it's about people, my wife and I say this all the time, you have to go to a doctor that you have to pay out of pocket for, because they actually really do care, but you have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars of your own money to do it. And a lot of people can't.
You can't.
Yeah.
So that's been a big piece of this whole story, just how much, financially it's cost us greatly.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack, but it's like,
I mean,
that's...
this is the beauty of these conversations. There's so many different bunny trails, like, that you go on. But I know this, so the MS piece, I was taking medicine. They gave me, I love that I can't even remember the name of the medicine anymore.
I love that too.
It makes me so excited, because there was a time when I could have told you every detail, but I love that it's old story. So that just tells you I've healed from MS. That's just an old story now. So this is the most beautiful part, right? So when they diagnose you with MS, they tell you, this isn't curable. It's a progressive disease. And all we can do is try to slow it down and give you the best quality of life. That's it.
And I know somebody in New Jersey that has it very badly, and is exactly what you just said. And now I'm looking at somebody that cured themselves from it.
So, I had lots of help and lots of help and lots of help. So I took this medicine for a year while I was learning all this stuff about how to heal, and it was a wild ride. And you start realizing how, I don't want to say just how duped you've been. Like, I felt so duped. I was so angry. The more I started uncovering about our foods and even down to dental care and
my
all
wife
of
talks
it.
about that too.
Yeah, now it cracks me up, like the fluoride stuff. I'm
fluoride.
like, Dennis had been looking at me sideways for 15 years. I was just like,
my wife too.
I mean, fluoride, it's a neurotoxin, and so you say, well, but it helps with cavities. And it's fine if that was our only exposure, but it's in all, it's not just getting your teeth cleaned and your toothpaste. It's
I feel like
everywhere.
I'm talking to my wife.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating.
Crazy.
But it's another bunny trail.
Yeah.
So the first year, I started cleaning up my food, and I started reaching out to holistic practitioners. And that was a very new arena for me. And I remember making some phone calls, and one of them was like, we do past life regression. I'm like, and then the next one was like, well, we do whatever, would use some weird energy. And I'm like, I don't know. I was so afraid of these words, and I, we're Christians, and I'm very much a faith person. And so the phone calls were always this: Lord, if this is of you, and this is a tool that I can use, show me. And if it's not the right person, show me, and I won't ever go back. So my first introduction into holistic medicine, I went to a NAET practitioner. It's like Nimbupad Allergy Elimination Technique, NAET. And that was the wildest thing, but it was exactly what I needed at the time. And it was my first introduction into muscle testing, which is wild. Like, have you ever been muscle tested? So like, you put your hand out and they'll push, and if you have a strong reaction, it's like a yes, or if it's weak, it's no, or either vice versa.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, so I remember this first appointment with her, she's like doing this muscle testing, and she's saying numbers, and my arm's like strong, and then it drops some, and I'm like, I don't know what I've gotten myself into. And so she starts, she's like, did something happen between the ages of it was like 12 and 15? And I'm like, yeah. It's like, my brother passed away in a car accident. And so now I'm looking at her and I'm like, this is trippy, and it's kind of weirded me out, and it felt like this thing maybe I shouldn't be involved in, almost like, tarot readings, like psychic readings. I'm like,
what's going on?
I don't know if I like this anymore.
Right.
And, but the bottom line was this innate allergy eliminates. You can have emotional allergies. And I didn't really realize this, but like grief, traumas, all kinds of things, they can actually wreak havoc on our immune system and just impact our health in general. And so how she explained this was like, our brains are like a computer. And when you have a computer that gets a virus, everything you try to do, hitting the enter button, the caps lock button, shift, alt, whatever, it's filtered through this virus, right? So when my brother died in that car accident, it was around my 15th birthday, he was 17. And she's like, when that happened, it was like a virus that entered the game, and everything from that point has been filtered through this virus. Wow. And so it was clearing those things. Well, thank you. And it's okay. I wouldn't be who I am today if I hadn't gone through that. Yeah. Right? Nobody likes to go through hard things, but the hard things are what make us the best versions of ourselves, right?
Truth.
It is true. So, while I would love for him to be here, he's not. So what do you do with it? It's not about what happens to you. It's what do you do with it? Right? We talked about
that. Same thing with my pops. Everybody knows that. So, yeah.
So, anyways, this set me on this path of like, oh my goodness. So when we were doing this first appointment with her, she asked me, she's like, so do you have any questions? I'm like, well, do you hear voices? Or I was so confused. And she's like, absolutely not. She's like, your body. So this was the introduction. She's like, this was the introduction, though, that we are energy. We are energy. And it doesn't have to be a dirty, like, weird word or hootie or, someone with, like, feathers. And, like, it doesn't have to be weird. We are energy beings. And it opened the door for me to understand that, things aren't just broken physically. There was emotional, spiritual, mental things. And so repair started a long time ago is what I'm getting at. Yeah. So I started out with her. Then I ended up with a gentleman that was a functional integrative medicine guy. And he helped me heal. And we discovered through bioenergetic feedback, which is these cradles you put your hand on, and it's kind of like a lie detector test of the body. There's a lot of science behind it, but I can't regurgitate it at the moment. Yeah. But discovered that, heavy metals, virus. So this whole MS piece, this is the wildest thing. The diagnosis was relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, which means you had multiple episodes within a time frame. I had been going in and getting brain scans, and I had activity without symptoms. And so they're like, oh, that's classic. The doctors gave me medicine for it. This medicine was like, I think it was like $12,000 or $13,000 a month. I didn't pay that, but I had like a co-pay program. Right. But very expensive medicine. And that was it. They said, don't eat foods high in vitamin A, I think it was. So like, can't have spinach. Don't sweat, like don't overheat. That can exacerbate symptoms. So here you are in this place in your life where you're being told, be still, don't move, don't eat these things that are high in these nutrients, because I don't even remember why that was the thing. It wasn't the medicine, it had something to do with, I love it's an old story. Yeah. So anyways, I was just like, this is just not adding up. So I ended up with this guy, but we discovered that I had a virus that had crossed the blood-brain barrier. And so this is what's so wild. Multiple sclerosis means like multiple lesions, or multiple sclerosis is like scar tissue, right?
Okay.
Scars, so multiple scars. That's not that scary sounding.
No.
If I came to you and said, oh my gosh, I have multiple scars, you'd be like, okay.
All right.
Like,
all right,
cool,
what do we
right?
do? Yeah.
And we also use this word autoimmune in our current culture, and you'll find people say, our body is attacking itself. No, No. Our body does not attack itself. What had happened, a virus crossed the blood-brain barrier. It was up here. My body was trying to deal with something that wasn't supposed to be there. So if there was virus like myelin sheath, the autoimmune, like your body's trying to take care of something, but they're looking at it as my body's attacking itself. When
Funny, they do say that today, but everybody, oh, it's attacking my, it doesn't.
I don't subscribe to that at all.
Me neither.
I think that our Western medicine they don't hold space for virus, parasites, heavy metals, all those things, because if they did, and it cuts into things in not a great way, but
right.
That's a
Cuts
whole other podcast.
Yeah, exactly. That's for another episode.
I'm not ready to
come
chew
back
on that
and do
one. Yeah.
We're going to do that, though.
Okay, so
I tell all these people we have a
So
lot of things to talk about.
I decided to quit taking the medication. I went to the neurologist 6 months after I'd quit taking this MS medication. And he said, how are you doing? And I said, well, I'm actually doing great. I said, I've been working with a functional integrative doctor, and I've cleaned up my food and whatever. He said, well, how are you doing on the medicine? And I was like, well, I quit taking it. And he's like, well, why? And I'm like, because I believe I can get well. And he said, have you had any symptoms or any flare-ups? I'm like, no. And he said, oh, so you're just lucky. That was the first time with Western medicine that I had been scoffed and dismissed.
Just lucky.
Like, you're just lucky. And so I tried to tell him about Dr. Terry Walls, because she was an MD, right? So, I mean, she would have some merit. And I remember looking at the doctor and saying, you have an opportunity with people, even if it's not 100% fix, if they can get some relief just doing this one shift, wouldn't it be worth sharing with them? Nope, he didn't want anything to do with me.
Nothing to do.
No, because at the end of the day, just take the word doctor, they're indoctrinated.
Yep.
And it's okay. I think there's great doctors out there, but it makes me sad when they lose the curiosity, right? Because science is always about being curious. Like, it shouldn't ever be a fixed thing. There should be curiosity.
There should, but it's also, I say this all the time, especially coming from Wall Street. People make lots of money on Wall Street in niche businesses, and then they think making lots of money that they know everything and that's it. Yeah. Doctors do the same thing in their little niche business that they're in, and then they don't want to hear it. Yeah. It's the same concept. It's almost like their ego gets in the way. And it's like, how do you not want
I'm not even so much sure that it's that they don't want to hear it, but I think when you've dedicated your time and money and resources to even become a doctor, to have to look at a patient that's pressing you, to admit you don't have the answers, when you live in this place where you have answers, right? Like, they're smart people.
I'm not denying that they're not smart.
If a doctor's watching and heard me talk about mitochondria, they could be just doing this. Like, I don't know. I know it's the powerhouse of the cell. That's all I need to know, and that it's important that we feed it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's just sad that the curiosity of it. But that was the first time I'd been dismissed by a doctor. But I told my mom, I was like, I can always go back on the medicine. Like, what do I have to lose? So I kind of started this, what do I have to lose mentality back in 2011, right? So I threw spaghetti at the ceiling. If you're from the North, you know what that means. Like, you know if the noodles are done or not, right? And so I ended up working with this guy named Michael Payne out in Virginia, and I owe him. I owe these people. So Joan Karp, Michael Payne, these people in my life were the most beautiful tools and resources that got placed into my life at the perfect season, right time. Just so beautiful in this healing process. So when I was with Michael, I had already done all the food stuff before I got to him, and he told me, he said, go get some letters behind your name and come work with me. And I said, okay. So I went and I went to Indianapolis and did a week-long intensive program to get like a certified natural health practitioner thing. And then fast forward, I ended up signing up to do their naturopathic doctor program. And so I finished that. But so by the time 2019 rolled around, I have been off of the MS medication now for 10, 11, 12 years. No issues. I know I fully healed from that.
No more double.
No.
All that stuff was gone.
I've never had another issue with it. But what's so funny is my daughter said to me, well, Mom, maybe you didn't have it. And I'm like, that's okay. There's going to be a lot of people who say, well, you just didn't have it. I said, but had I not ever have gone outside of the lines,
Right.
I would still be a medicated MS patient.
Absolutely.
So you tell me who has it and who doesn't.
Right.
It's such a curious thing to me, because I had brain scan after brain scan and blood work and images, and it was relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, so much so that they gave me medications that cost, $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
So you tell me. Well, I don't know. I don't want it. So
Was the medicine working?
I don't know.
We didn't know because you took yourself off of it. Yeah.
I mean, it was. They would have said it was working.
Of course they would.
Had I stayed on it longer, because I guess if you go in time and don't, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know
because
you took.
I took it for the first year. I took it for the first year faithfully. It was a shot, and I was really that was traumatic in and of itself, giving yourself shots and stuff. It's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
But here I am. So here I am. But if I hadn't gone outside the line, so 2019 rolls around, and I noticed this lump. I had been out of the Western arena now since like 2011 is really when I fully exited that scene. And I had tools, and I had, I had a toolbox full of awesome things. And so I was able to go at it from a different place, which I'm so grateful for. So let me see. So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
So lump, I reached out to an acupuncturist. I had never been to him before. And I went in and told him what was going on. And he said, listen, he's like, why don't we get some diagnostic work done? And I remember feeling kind of sorry for myself that day, because I was like, I've already done this MS thing. And like, why am I having to do this again?
Yeah.
And he looked right at me and he said, well, if it's not you, it's the person to the left or the right of you. So why not you? And I just remember being like taken back by that. And he said, it's 1 in every 3 people. So why not you? And I so appreciate that, because he didn't give me
Is
the
that the
opportunity.
stat? 1 in every 3?
1 in 3 people will deal with cancer at some point. Like that's what this was 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Or no, not 12, 13 years. Dear Lord, 2019, 6 years ago. It
6.
feels like 13 years ago. So no, it was, 6 years.
But 6 years is a long time in the medical world.
Yeah. And so when he said that, though, I'm like, okay, there's no time to feel sorry for yourself, right? So I appreciated that. And so I made an appointment with a family doctor, because I knew with insurance I had to get the referrals to go to these appointments. And I went to this little family doctor guy and told him what was going on. And he's like, okay, I'm going to get you set up for a diagnostic mammogram and ultrasound. So I went to this appointment. Now, this was on a Tuesday. I was supposed to be flying out to Denmark on Friday. And my mom had come into town to watch the kids while I was away, because my husband travels for work. And so she just happened to be there that day. Now, I tell her that morning, so why don't you just come with me? We lived in Charlotte, North Carolina area at the time. And I said, why don't you just come with me and we'll just go have lunch after this appointment in Charlotte, whatever. And so I go into this appointment, they do the mammogram, take me back to the room and start doing the ultrasound. And then they bring the doctor in she's doing some extra images. They end up sending me back for more more pictures at the mammogram machine, whatever you want to call it. And I knew then, I thought, this isn't good, because they're sending me back for different images. And so I go back to the room and she's looking around again with the ultrasound, and this doctor just had this this anxiousness about her. I mean, she just was like, I just so wish I could describe what I was seeing. But it was just this, you could just tell it was like this anxious space. And I remember saying to her, I said, listen, I know there's something going on. Like, I can feel, I know there's something going on. And I'm not afraid of the word cancer. And I said, but you seem like really anxious. And I said, that's honestly more concerning than anything you can share with. I was like, you know, it's just uncomfortable, like how anxious you are. And she says to me, she said, well, I'm not anxious. I'm anxious for you. And I was like, okay. Like, it was the strangest exchange.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're anxious for me. And so she starts telling me, she's like, you know, we need to obviously we need to have some biopsies and stuff done. But I think that this is a very aggressive form of cancer, and it should have been taken off like yesterday. She said, I want to schedule you surgical time. I'm going to go ahead and schedule surgical time before we even get the biopsies back, because when we get the biopsies back, I don't want to wait for a surgical room. Wow. And I'm like, okay. So then they do this thing which if any woman's ever been told they have cancer, it was almost like this death march from this room to the other room where they send you to go wait and schedule your appointments and whatnot. And it was like this somber, like they're walking me, like the hand on the low back, hand on this arm, like, oh, you know, like, oh, like just this. It just felt so wrong. And they're just taking, I'm like, this is not helpful.
Right.
So I get back to this little room and they're like, well, we're going to try to get some stuff scheduled. And I said, listen, I've been back here a long time. My mom's out in the lobby. Can you let her come back here? So I said, I'm sure she's getting worried at this point, right? And so they bring my mom in, and my mom looks at me, and I was like, well, I said, it's not good. And I said, I don't know exactly what's going on, but they want to schedule some stuff, and I'm just waiting for the schedule. Well, my mom like goes pale, just like ghost, because we had lost my brother at 17. And she's just like, and I looked at her and I said, absolutely not. Fear has no place here. Wow. I said, so get yourself pulled together. I said, we're going to walk out of this room and I'm going to call some people and we're going to make a plan and I'm going to be okay. So do not do this. No, ma'am. And she's looking at me like, oh, like, okay. Like, and I'm like, God. Absolutely not. Like, we're not doing that. I just knew, like, that was death.
Yeah.
Them marching me, that's
I
death.
was going to say, they were marching you down.
And I think what's so sad, had I not dealt with the previous 9 years of healing and walking outside the line and understanding that my mind is the most powerful medicine that I have.
Yeah.
It is it's like 99% of the deal right here. And I knew that if I fell into what they were all trying to sink into, I knew I would never come out of it. I'm like, so we're not doing that. Like, nope, we don't have time for that. So put your chin up. We're walking out this door with our heads held high and we're going to make a plan. That was how I dealt with that day. So they were making these appointments and they were like, well, we can't get 2 surgical times side by side. So I guess how it works with biopsies, like they have to schedule increments of time, at least this place, and they couldn't find enough increments of time together in a surgical room to get all the biopsies done at one time. So at this point, you have to bear in mind, I had gone through schooling for holistic medicine, and some people might say, well, it's just a silly piece of paper, but I learned beautiful things. And one of the things that we talked about a lot in the schooling was like when you start plucking tumors and things, it can create other problems like risk reward, right? So I was already like a little uncertain about doing a biopsy, but I thought, I just need to move forward and, prevention, get into it early. That's all the branding, early detection, early treatment. These things are all the most important things. And I'm not saying they're not important, but at the time, like that's the culture, that's what's buzzing in your head. So she's trying to schedule these appointments and she's like, well, we can get you in on Thursday for only one of the biopsies. And then you'll have to come back, when she was looking at everything. And I said, will I be able to go to Denmark? Like I'm supposed to fly out on Friday. I said, I don't mind getting it done, but I'm supposed to fly out Friday. Now I'd been planning this Denmark trip for almost a year and a half, and it was a friend and I that were going to visit a friend that lives there. She had lived in the States for a couple of years, and we were all good friends, and we hadn't seen her in like 10 years, so we were heading out to Denmark to go see her. And the doctor was like, well, I don't think it's a good plan. Like, if it were me, I would cancel that trip. Like, this is high priority. So I was like, okay. I mean, like, quite literally, like, they had me, like, on my way out.
Right.
Urgent. It was urgent. There was this sense of urgency and fear behind it that I'm just like, it just was so gross. It just felt so gross that day. And so she's telling me about this one biopsy time. She's like, we can get you on Tuesday. And then she kept trying to fit. And I said, listen, how about this? I said, my mom and I are going to go. We've been here for a long time, and we're just going to go have lunch. You get the scheduling stuff figured out and call me whenever you get it figured out, instead of me sitting here while you do all this. So my mom and I leave, and I end up getting this phone call a couple hours later, and they're like, okay, so our first available is whatever the date was, and it was literally 30 days out. And I'm like, you had me, like, should have been taken off, like my breast should have been taken off yesterday
now
to 30 days is like the soonest you can get to me. Like, okay, like I see. So I want you to take a moment though and think about, had I not had all this previous experience with that, I know I can heal, I know my mind's powerful, I have great tools and workers. Cancer's not a death sentence. Let's just get it out there. It's not a death sentence.
Agreed.
Stage 4 is insurance terms. It just means it's spread somewhere else. It's what gives them the ability to give you other medications. I don't care what they say. They use the word terminal. It's just insurance codes. Like, I'm just not buying it today.
I love it.
And so, but I had all these beautiful things in my back pocket so that when she said 30 days, I was like, I'll tell you what. I'll call you guys when I'm ready. And I exited the Western scene that day. So I had a mammogram and an ultrasound. That was it. So I went back to the acupuncturist, and he told me, he's like, it's just diagnostic. So we can use the information. It doesn't mean you have to do what they say to do. And so now this is where things get interesting. I had started treatment from day one. I left that mammogram ultrasound appointment, called up my buddies that I worked with in Virginia. I'm like, hey, this is going on. I'm leaving for Denmark on Friday. What can you get to me between now and then that I can just start help mitigating some of this imbalance? Okay, notice I just called it an imbalance. It's just an imbalance. That's it.